What happens when a man throws away a diamond, believing he's upgrading to a newer, shinier stone? Julian Vance thought he had it all: a successful company, a beautiful wife, and a glamorous new model on his arm. He decided he didn't need the wife anymore. He callously discarded her, laughing all the way to his new life. He didn't know one thing. He didn't know his wife, Elara, was the only person his powerful father trusted, and he didn't know that his father was about to make the ultimate move from beyond the grave, turning Julian's new life into a living nightmare. The penthouse on Park Avenue was less a home than a museum of Julian Vance's ego. Every surface was cold, reflective marble or glass, populated by sterile, modern furniture that cost a fortune but offered zero comfort. It was a perfect reflection of the marriage it housed. Elara Vance moved through the rooms with a quiet grace that had, over the years, become invisibility. Julian rarely looked at her anymore, his gaze perpetually fixed on the glowing screen of his phone, a device that held more of his attention and affection than she ever had. This evening was no different. Julian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lights of Manhattan sparkling below like a carpet of fallen stars. He was a handsome man, sculpted by expensive trainers and tailored Tom Ford suits, but a permanent, petulant scowl had settled on his features. He was texting, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "You'll be late for the charity dinner, Julian," Elara said, her voice soft. She wore a simple, elegant, navy Roland Moreau gown. Her only jewelry, the understated pearl earrings his father, Marcus, had given her. "I'm not going," Julian replied, not looking up. "Something's come up. A sudden meeting with the Singapore investors. You go. Make the donation. Show your face. That's what you're good at." Elara felt the familiar, dull ache of his dismissal. "Julian, your father will be there. He's making an appearance. He specifically asked for you." This made Julian look up, his eyes cold. "My father?" "Of course." "Well, my father will have to understand that I am busy running the company he's supposed to let me lead. This Singapore deal is worth 9 figures. His little rubber chicken dinner can wait." He adjusted the cuffs of his Patek Philippe watch, a gift from himself. Elara knew he was lying. There was no Singapore deal. The scent on his suit jacket when he'd come home to change wasn't the sterile air of the Vanguard Holdings boardroom. It was the heavy, sweet smell of Baccarat Rouge 540, a perfume favored by women half her age. It was the perfume of Chloe Sterling, the new face of the disastrous fashion line Julian had insisted the company launch. "As you wish," Elara said, turning away. "I'll make your apologies." "Don't," he snapped. "Just tell him I'm busy. He respects work." Elara didn't respond. She knew Marcus Vance respected work, but not vanity. And Julian's recent work was all vanity. She took the chauffeured Rolls-Royce to the plaza alone. The ballroom was dripping with crystals and old money. She found Marcus Vance, the patriarch, seated at the head table, looking frail. He was confined to a wheelchair now, a gruff, sharp-eyed man whose illness had only sharpened his perception. "He's not coming," Marcus grunted, waving away a waiter. It wasn't a question. "A last-minute crisis with the Singapore investors," Elara said, the lie tasting like ash. Marcus gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Singapore? Is that what she's calling herself? Last week it was the Dubai expansion." He motioned for Elara to sit. "He's a fool, Elara, and he thinks I'm a bigger one." Elara sat, her hands clasped in her lap. "He's just distracted, Marcus. The new fashion line. The Chloe by Vanguard disaster," Marcus scoffed. "It's hemorrhaging money. He's leveraging our commercial real estate to fund handbags. He's a child playing with billion-dollar blocks. And you let him. It's not my place, Marcus. The hell it isn't, he growled, drawing a few looks. You're the only one in that house with a damn brain. You're the one who reads the quarterly reports. You're the one who catches the accounting errors. I know you do, Margaret tells me. Margaret was his executive secretary of 40 years. Elara looked down. I try to advise him. Stop advising. Start doing. His voice softened. His hand, thin and papery, found hers. You're a good woman, Elara. Too good for him. You remind me of his mother. Loyal, smart, and completely underestimated. Don't let that fool destroy what my father and I built. The rest of the evening was a blur of polite smiles and empty chatter. When Elara returned to the penthouse at midnight, it was empty. Julian wasn't home. He didn't come home at 1 or at 2. He finally walked in at 3:15 a.m., his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, his tie gone. The smell of baccarat rouge and champagne clung to him like a second skin. He didn't look guilty. He looked energized. Elara, he said, flicking on the harsh overhead lights of the living room. You're up. Good. We need to talk. Elara, who had been sitting in the dark, felt her stomach clench. This was it. I'm leaving you, he said, as casually as one might announce they were switching dry cleaners. I'm in love with Chloe Sterling. We're going to be together. Elara stared at him. She had expected it, dreaded it, but the casual cruelty of the delivery still stole her breath. Julian, after 12 years... Oh, please don't get sentimental. It's boring, he sneered. Let's be adults. This marriage has been a business arrangement for years. A very, very good one for you. You came from nothing, Elara. I made you a Vance. Now I'm unmaking you. He tossed a thick envelope onto the Biedermeier coffee table. That's a divorce settlement. It's generous. $5 million, tax-free. You get to keep your jewelry, whatever car you're driving. In exchange, you sign the NDA, you don't contest, and you're out of this apartment by the end of the week. $5 million? She whispered, the number feeling like a physical blow. To him, it was pocket change. To him, she was pocket change. Be smart, Elara, he said, loosening his shirt. Take the deal. I am the future of Vanguard Holdings. When my father passes, I will be one of the richest men in New York. I'm offering you $5 million. If you fight me, I'll drag you through the mud, and my lawyers will bury you. You'll walk away with nothing but your good name, and frankly, who cares about that? He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in months. His eyes were filled with nothing but cold, dismissive contempt. Chloe is young, she's exciting, she's seen. You're just, here, your background. I'm tired of the background, Elara. Elara stood up, her body trembling, but her voice was surprisingly steady. When do you want me to leave? Julian blinked, surprised by her lack of hysterics. I'll have my assistant coordinate with you. I'm staying at the Pierre with Chloe until you're gone. He paused at the door. Oh, and my father. Don't bother him with this. He's sick. I'll tell him myself when the time is right. You mean you'll tell him after I'm gone and the papers are signed? She said, her voice flat. Like I said, Julian smiled, a thin reptilian smile. You're a smart girl. Don't ruin it. He left. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the vast, cold penthouse. Elara stood alone, surrounded by tens of millions of dollars in art and real estate, and felt the chilling, terrifying freedom of having absolutely nothing left to lose. The days that followed were a blur of calculated cruelty. Julian, it turned out, was thorough. The morning after he left, Ilara's Amex Centurion card was declined at the local Gristades supermarket. She was buying tea. The humiliation burned hotter than any anger. When she called the car service, she was politely informed that her account had been suspended. Julian's assistant, a sharp-tongued young woman who clearly worshipped Chloe, called to coordinate. The coordination consisted of being told that movers would arrive on Friday at 9 a.m. Ilara was to have her personal effects packed. Anything left would be considered donated to the apartment. While Ilara sorted through 12 years of her life, boxing up books and clothes, the New York gossip pages, led by the infamous Page 6, exploded. Julian and Chloe were suddenly the city's hottest couple. There were paparazzi photos of them dining at Carbone, Chloe draped in diamonds that Ilara recognized, the Graf necklace Julian had supposedly bought on investment. There were pictures of them boarding a NetJets flight, Chloe waving to the camera, her hand adorned with a massive new diamond ring. They weren't just dating, they were flaunting. Ilara worked mechanically, her grief a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She found a modest, furnished one-bedroom apartment to rent on the Upper West Side, a world away from the Park Avenue splendor. She sold a pair of her own diamond earrings, ones she had bought before Julian, to secure the lease and have operating cash. The only person she spoke to was Marcus. She called him the day after Julian left. "He's gone," she said simply, sitting on her bedroom floor surrounded by boxes. There was a long silence on the other end, then a deep, ragged sigh. "The fool," Marcus rasped. "The goddamned arrogant fool. Where are you, child?" "I'm in the apartment, packing. He's given me until Friday." "You will do no such thing," Marcus commanded. "You will come here, to the estate. Bring your things. You are not leaving this family." "He is." "Marcus, I can't. It's his family home." "It's my home, Ilara, and you are more family to me right now than he is. Get here, now. I'll send my car." An hour later, Marcus's own black Bentley, driven by a driver who had been with the family for 30 years, pulled up to the penthouse. Ilara walked out with 2 suitcases. She didn't look back. The Vance estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was a different world. It was old-world elegance, warm woods, rich tapestries, and sprawling manicured gardens. It was a home, not a showroom. Marcus had her set up in the guest wing, a beautiful suite of rooms overlooking a rose garden. For the next 2 weeks, a strange, quiet routine formed. Ilara spent her days with Marcus. His health was fading fast, the doctors were blunt, but his mind remained a steel trap. He had Margaret bring him the company financials every single day. "Look at this," he'd mutter, pointing a trembling finger at a line item. "He's funneled another $20 million into marketing for her. It's a vanity project, Ilara, a $300 million vanity project. He's using the pension fund's leverage." "Marcus, you have to stop him," Ilara urged, appalled. "I can't, not directly. He's CEO. The board is full of his yes-men. If I fight him publicly, the stock will collapse. Vanguard will be finished. I'll be the man who destroyed his own legacy out of spite." He coughed, a terrible rattling sound. "But there are other ways to fix things." He had her read to him. Not fiction, but market reports, SEC filings, and competitor analyses. He would ask her questions, probing her understanding. "What would you do with the commercial real TE portfolio, Ilara?" I'd liquidate the properties in declining markets, consolidate the debt, and I'd stop the fashion line immediately. It's a sunk cost." He would nod, a small, satisfied gleam in his fading eyes. Good. Meanwhile, Julian was on a rampage. When he learned Ilara was staying at the estate, he'd stormed in, pushing past the staff. Ilara had found him shouting at his father, who was propped up in his study. "You're taking her side?" Julian roared, his face puce. "She's nobody. She's the woman I'm divorcing. She's the woman who has shown me more loyalty and respect in 12 years than you have in 40, Marcus thundered back, his voice surprisingly strong. "She's the one who's been by my side while I've been dying, while you've been off jet-setting with that model. I'm building the brand, something you'd know nothing about. You're an old man, stuck in the past. This company is mine. You're just holding on to the chair." "Get out," Marcus whispered, his face pale with fury. "What? Get out of my house, and don't come back until you're ready to beg forgiveness. From me, and from her." Julian had stared, dumbfounded. Then his face twisted into a mask of pure, spoiled rage. "Fine. Stay here and die with her. See what good it does you. I've already filed the papers. She'll get her $5 million and not a penny more. My lawyers will see to it. You can't touch my inheritance, old man. It's all locked up." He had slammed the door so hard, a small painting on the wall rattled. Ilara had rushed to Marcus's side, holding a glass of water to his lips. "He's right, you know," Marcus wheezed, catching his breath. "The way the trusts are structured, he's the sole beneficiary of the voting shares. My hands, they're tied." Ilara felt a cold dread. "So he's won. He'll destroy everything." Marcus looked at her, his eyes unblinking. "He thinks the trusts are ironclad. He thinks my will is just a formality. He's forgotten one thing. The controlling stake, the real power, isn't in the family trust." "What do you mean?" "It's in my personal, private holding company. A little shell I set up 30 years ago. It holds 51% of the voting stock in Vanguard. Julian's trust, it only holds 20%. He thinks his 20% is the controlling share. He's never bothered to read the full corporate charter." Marcus smiled, a grim, skeletal expression. "He's a fool, Ilara. A magnificent, pedigreed, expensive fool." He reached for the phone. "Get me Harrison," he told his nurse. "Tell him to come to the house. Tonight. We have work to do." The last days of Marcus Vance were quiet, dignified, and filled with a surprising amount of work. Mr. Harrison, a severe, silver-haired lawyer from the white shoe firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, became a fixture at the estate. He and Marcus, often with Ilara present as a witness and a note-taker, would spend hours poring over documents. Julian was nowhere to be seen. He was, according to the Daily Mail, in Aspen with Chloe, inspecting properties. He was spending his inheritance before he even had it. He sent one text message to the estate's general line. "Let me know when it's over." Ilara felt her grief for the man she had known for 12 years curdle into something cold and hard. Marcus was clear-eyed. "He's not my son," he said one afternoon, as Ilara adjusted the pillows behind his back. "Not anymore. A son doesn't wait for his father to die like a vulture. A son doesn't discard a wife like yesterday's trash." "Don't say that, Marcus," Ilara whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "He's just lost." "He's lost," Marcus agreed, his voice a dry rasp. "And he will never be found. But my company, my legacy, it doesn't have to be. You're strong, Ilara. Stronger than you know. You've just been living in a cage and you forgot you had wings." He made her promise. "Promise me, Ilara. Don't let him ruin it. Protect it. For me. For the employees. For the future." "I promise, Marcus," she said, clasping his hand. "I'll do my best." "Your best," he murmured, a rare, soft smile touching his lips. "Your best is better than his finest day." The end came on a Tuesday morning, just as the sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It was peaceful. Marcus had looked out the window, taken a deep, rattling breath, and then he was gone. Ilara was holding his hand. Margaret, his secretary, was standing in the doorway, weeping silently. Ilara made the necessary calls, first to the doctor, then to the funeral home, and finally to Julian. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep and annoyance. "What?" "Julian, it's Ilara. I'm at the estate. It's your father. He passed away about 20 minutes ago." There was a long silence. Ilara heard a woman's voice in the background, giggling. "Who is it, baby? Tell them to call back." "Right," Julian said, his voice suddenly all business. "Okay, right. Got it. I'll be on the next flight. Have Harrison schedule the will reading. Friday. And handle the funeral arrangements, will you? Make it appropriate, dignified." He hung up. He didn't say, "Thank you." He didn't ask how his father had died. He didn't ask if she was okay. He just gave orders. Handle it. The funeral was exactly what Julian had ordered, appropriate and dignified. It was also enormous. Half of Wall Street and all of New York high society descended on the small Greenwich church. Julian, in a flawlessly tailored Brioni suit, stood at the front, accepting condolences. Chloe was beside him, an enormous black veil covering her face, her hand possessively on his arm. She looked, Ilara thought with a sickening lurch, like she was playing the part of the grieving widow. Ilara sat in the second row, with Margaret and some of the long-time Vanguard executives who had actually respected Marcus. She was composed, her grief private and real. She saw Julian look at her once, his eyes sweeping over her simple black Dior dress with a flicker of, was it surprise or annoyance that she was even there? After the burial, people returned to the estate for a somber reception. Julian was in his element, holding court, accepting sympathies, already looking every bit the new patriarch. "A terrible loss," he'd say, shaking a senator's hand. "But my father prepared me. The company is in strong hands. Vanguard will continue his legacy." Chloe, her veil now lifted, was already talking to an interior designer about lightening up the dreadfully dark decor of the estate. Ilara watched them from the doorway of the library, the room where she had spent Marcus's last weeks. "He's disgusting," Margaret hissed, appearing at Ilara's side with a cup of tea. "He's already measuring the drapes. And she—" Margaret's eyes were venomous. "She's wearing the emeralds, Mrs. Vance's emeralds, the ones Marcus was saving for, well." Ilara looked. Sure enough, around Chloe's neck was a legendary necklace of staggering Colombian emeralds that had belonged to Julian's mother. "It doesn't matter, Margaret," Ilara said, her voice weary. "It's all his now." "Don't be so sure," Margaret said, with a strange, small smile. "Mr. Vance was a very, very smart man. Friday. The reading is at 10 a.m. Mr. Harrison's office. You will be there, won't you?" "Mr. Harrison's office sent me a formal summons," Ilara said, confused. "I assumed it was a formality for the divorce settlement." "Just be there, dear," Margaret said, patting her arm, "and wear something authoritative." Friday morning was cold and bright. The offices of Sullivan and Cromwell in downtown Manhattan were the epitome of quiet, terrifying power. The walls were paneled in dark mahogany, the air smelled of old leather and money, and the silence was broken only by the distant, respectful click of heels on marble floors. Ilara arrived at 9:50 a.m. She wore a charcoal grey acris suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, professional bun. She looked less like a grieving widow-to-be and more like a woman about to conduct a hostile takeover. Margaret's advice had resonated. She was shown into a large, intimidating conference room. Mr. Harrison sat at the head of a 20-foot-long table. Julian and Chloe were already there. They were a stark contrast to the room's sobriety. Julian was in a bespoke pinstripe suit, looking impatient and checking his phone. Chloe was in a tight, snow-white dress that was wildly inappropriate, texting furiously. She looked bored. When Ilara walked in, Julian actually scowled. "What is she doing here? Harrison, I told you to mail her the settlement check. This is a private family matter." "Mrs. Vance is here at my specific request, Julian," Harrison said, his voice like gravel. "As she is a named party in your father's last will and testament. Please, sit, Ilara." Ilara took a seat at the far end of the table, placing her briefcase beside her. Chloe snickered, whispering to Julian, "A briefcase? How adorable. She thinks this is a job interview." At precisely 10 Mas a.m., Harrison cleared his throat and put on his reading glasses. "We are gathered for the reading of the last will and testament of Marcus Nathaniel Vance. I will dispense with the preamble. Marcus was a direct man." He began to read. There were bequests for long-time staff. Margaret received a generous pension and a small cottage on the estate. The driver received a lump sum. Various charities received significant donations. Julian tapped his fingers, visibly annoyed by the delays. "Get to the important part, Harrison." "Very well," Harrison said, his eyes flicking to Julian over his glasses. "We come to the matter of the primary estate. I will read Article 4, Section A, in its entirety." He cleared his throat. "To my only son, Julian Robert Vance." Julian sat up, a predatory smile on his face. Chloe put her phone down, her eyes gleaming. "I leave my entire collection of Patek Philippe timepieces, which he has always admired." Julian's smile faltered. He loved the watches. "But," Harrison continued, "I also leave him the sum of $1, paid from my personal account, in the hopes that he will one day, through its possession, come to understand the value of both time and money, two things he has so gleefully wasted." The silence in the room was absolute. Chloe's mouth fell open. Julian's face went from confused to white to a deep, blotchy red. What is this? This is a joke, a senile old man's joke. Read the rest of it. The part about the company, the trusts." "I am not finished, Julian," Harrison said, his voice cold. He turned the page. "Article 5. All the rest, residue and remainder of my estate, both real and personal, of whatsoever kind, and wheresoever situated, including, but not limited to, my properties in Manhattan, Aspen, and Greenwich, my personal investment portfolios, my art collection, and most importantly, my 100% controlling interest in the Vance Capital Holdings Shell Corporation, which itself holds 51% of the voting stock of Vanguard Holdings International." Julian was breathing hard, his knuckles white on the table. "Go on," he hissed. Harrison looked up, first at Julian, then at Chloe, and finally, his gaze settled on Ilara at the end of the table. "I leave in its entirety to my beloved and loyal daughter-in-law, Ilara Catherine Vance." If the previous silence was absolute, this was a vacuum. Chloe made a small, strangled sound, like a dying bird. Julian shot out of his chair so violently it crashed backward onto the thick carpet. No, that's impossible. He's senile. She manipulated him. That sick, dying old man. She poisoned him against me." "He was of perfectly sound mind, Julian," Harrison said, placing a small digital recorder on the table. "He affirmed his wishes on video, in the presence of myself, 2 partners, and a psychiatrist just last week. He was lucid, specific, and adamant." "I'll contest this," Julian screamed, his face a mask of primal fury. I'll sue you! I'll sue her! She's a gold-digging whore! I would advise against that, Harrison said smoothly, standing up. Marcus's will includes a no-contest clause. The moment you file a suit, you forfeit the watch collection. And as for your accusations, I would be careful. Elara is now, for all intents and purposes, your boss. And she is also the wealthiest woman in New York. Chloe was staring at Julian, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The man she had attached herself to, the man who was her ticket to billions, was nothing. He had a watch collection and $1. "Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Julian, fix this." Julian pointed a shaking finger at Elara, who hadn't moved. She just sat there, watching him, her expression unreadable. "You," he spat. "You did this." Elara finally spoke, her voice clear and strong, cutting through his rage. "No, Julian," she said, standing up and gathering her things. "You did. You, and your lies, and your ego. Marcus just saw it. He saw you." She turned to Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, please schedule an emergency board meeting for Monday morning, 9 a.m. As the new majority shareholder, I will be presiding. And please have security escort Mr. Vance from my father-in-law's properties. He is no longer welcome." She nodded at Chloe. "And her." Elara walked out of the conference room, her heels clicking decisively on the marble floor, leaving behind the smoking ruins of Julian's life. The Wall Street Journal headline on Monday morning was brutal. "Vance shakeup. Jilted wife inherits billion-dollar Vanguard empire. Son left with watches." The stock dipped 15% on the opening bell. The vultures were circling. Elara, however, was not the quiet mouse the press, or Julian, had painted her to be. She'd spent the entire weekend locked in the Greenwich Library with Margaret, 3 forensic accountants, and a pot of black coffee. What she found was far worse than she'd imagined. Julian wasn't just incompetent, he was reckless to the point of criminality. Chloe by Vanguard wasn't just a $300 million loss, it was a black hole of shell companies, payments to non-existent consultants, Chloe's friends, and leveraged assets. Vanguard Aviation was 2 private Gulfstream G6 leased under the company's name, used almost exclusively for Julian and Chloe's personal travel. The company wasn't just bleeding, it was on life support. Marcus had known it was bad, but Julian had hidden the true extent of the debt from everyone. Vanguard Holdings was 3 weeks from defaulting on a $500 million loan, at which point the banks would seize the company's core assets, and it would be all over. At 9 a.m., Elara walked into the 50th floor boardroom. The atmosphere was frigid. The 12 board members, all men Julian had appointed, or who had been his father's old skeptical contemporaries, stared at her as if she were a ghost. "Good morning, gentlemen," Elara said, taking the seat at the head of the table. "Marcus's seat. I am Elara Vance, and as of Friday, I am the majority shareholder and new chairwoman of Vanguard Holdings." A portly man named Henderson, the COO and Julian's main crony, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Vantor, with all due respect, this is a complex, global corporation, not a garden party. The market is in freefall. The investors are panicked. We need a leader, not a placeholder." Elara looked at him, her gaze flat. "You're right, Mr. Henderson. We do need a leader. Which is why, as my first act, I am accepting your resignation, effective immediately." Henderson sputtered. "You can't do that." "I can," Elara said, sliding a folder across the table. "That is a full audit of the Vanguard Aviation project, which you personally signed off on. It details $28 million in unapproved expenditures, including the purchase of 18 solid gold sinks for the jet Chloe was designing. Security will escort you out." The other men stared, stunned into silence. "Now," Ilara said, turning to the rest of the board, "let's talk about the $500 million loan default we're facing, the one Mr. Henderson and Mr. Vance forgot to include in the quarterly projections." For the next 3 hours, Ilara didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She eviscerated them with data. She quoted SEC filings, debt-to-equity ratios, and burn rates from memory. She had, in 2 days, absorbed more about the company's true state than the board had in 2 years. "We are liquidating Chloe by Vanguard and Vanguard Aviation by end of day," she announced. "We are selling the Aspen property and the Manhattan penthouse. We are grounding the jets. We are firing the entire marketing team Julian hired. We are going back to basics, commercial real estate and sustainable investments, the 2 areas your former CEO fatally ignored." By the time she was done, the room was silent. She had their terrified, grudging respect. Meanwhile, Julian's world was imploding. He had been locked out of the penthouse. His company credit cards were cancelled. When he tried to storm the Vanguard building, the security guards, the same men who had bowed to him a week earlier, had politely but firmly barred his entry. He and Chloe were holed up in her Soho apartment, a tiny, trendy box compared to what they were used to. The calls from creditors had already started. "Julian, you have to do something," Chloe shrieked, throwing an $8,000 Hermes throw pillow at his head. "She's seizing my clothing line. Those are my designs." "They're not your designs, Chloe. You hired someone from Parsons to do them," Julian yelled, pouring a heavy glass of Macallan 25, one of the last bottles he'd grabbed from the penthouse. "Don't you get it? She has everything. The money, the company. It's all hers." "But the divorce. You said you were divorcing her. She gets half of your stuff, right?" Julian let out a hollow, terrifying laugh. "Half. Half of what, Chloe? I don't have anything. I left her. The divorce isn't finalized. She's the one with the assets. I'm the one who's entitled to half of her fortune. But she filed on me first. Adultery. With you." The color drained from Chloe's face as the reality hit her. She wasn't the wife. She wasn't even the ex-wife. She was the mistress, the one who gets nothing. "So I get nothing?" she whispered. "All this for nothing?" "We get nothing," Julian roared. That mouse, she took it all." Chloe looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't the powerful, handsome tycoon she'd seduced. He was a red-faced, desperate, broke man. He was a loser. "I need some air," she said, grabbing her Chanel bag. "Where are you going?" Julian demanded, a new panic in his voice. "Out." She walked out of the apartment, past the concierge, and into a waiting Uber. She didn't look back. An hour later, she was on the phone with a TMZ reporter, negotiating the price for her exclusive tell-all, "He was a fool. How I was duped by the disinherited Vance." The next 6 months were a brutal, relentless climb. Ilara Vance worked 18-hour days, fueled by black coffee and a cold, burning determination to honor her promise to Marcus. She lived out of the Greenwich estate, sleeping in the guest room, her war room, a small study filled with whiteboards and financial printouts. She was ruthless. She slashed the company's bloated executive payroll. She sold off the vanity assets, the jets, the art Julian had bought, the fleet of Maybachs, at fire sale prices. It was just enough to stop the bleeding. But it wasn't enough to save the company. The $500 million loan was still due. The bankers at JP Morgan, who had personally been courted and then ignored by Julian, were sensing blood in the water. They wanted to be paid, in full, or they would initiate foreclosure. Elara called a meeting. Not in her boardroom, but in theirs. She walked into the J.P. Morgan headquarters alone, carrying her briefcase. She was shown into a room with 4 managing directors, all of whom looked at her with polite, predatory smiles. Mrs. Vance, the lead banker, a man named Henderson, no relation to the fired COO, but just as smug, began. "We're glad you've come to discuss the terms of your default." "I'm not here to discuss a default, Mr. Henderson," Elara said, opening her briefcase and handing out a slim binder to each of them. "I'm here to offer you a new deal." Henderson chuckled, opening the binder. "A new deal? With what collateral? Your ex-husband leveraged everything." "Not everything," Elara said. "He only focused on the glamorous assets. He ignored the industrial real estate portfolio my father-in-law acquired in the 90s. Warehouses in what are now prime logistics hubs, data center sites. He thought they were boring." Henderson's smile faded as he turned the page. The valuations were new, and they were staggering. The boring portfolio was worth 3 times what it was on the books. "This is impressive, but it's illiquid. It doesn't solve your immediate cash flow problem." "Turn to page 5, Elara said. "That's my restructuring plan. I'm not asking you to forgive the loan. I'm asking for a 6-month extension and another $200 million in operating capital." Henderson choked. You're asking us for more money?" "Yes. Because, as you can see on page 6, you are already exposed on this loan for $500 million. If Vanguard goes into Chapter 11, which I will file this afternoon if you refuse, your committee of creditors will get 10 cents on the dollar. You will be responsible for one of the biggest losses in your bank's history. Or you can give me the $200 million, which I will use to develop 2 of these data center sites, and which I have already pre-leased to Amazon and Google. My projections, which are conservative, show you will be paid in full, with interest, within 9 months." The men stared at her. This was not the quiet, dismissed wife. This was Marcus Vance, reborn in a tailored suit. "You're offering us a choice," Henderson said slowly, "between a guaranteed, catastrophic loss and a high-risk gamble." "It's not a gamble," Elara said, standing up. "It's a certainty. Julian was a gambler. I am an investor. You have 1 hour to decide." She got the loan. While Elara was saving the empire, Julian was hitting rock bottom. Chloe's tell-all interview had been devastating, painting him as an incompetent, arrogant fool who was terrible in bed. He was a social pariah. He'd lost the legal challenge to the will. The video testimony was undeniable. He'd been forced to sell his watch collection, one by one, to pay his legal fees. He was living in a small rented condo in Fort Lee, New Jersey, a place he used to mock. He was broke. He had tried to get a job, but his name was toxic. No one on Wall Street would touch him. He was Julian Vance, the man who'd lost it all. His rage had simmered into a pathetic, desperate self-pity. He spent his days drinking cheap vodka and watching CNBC, where he would occasionally see Elara's face. She was the Iron Widow, the Vance matriarch. She was saving the company. His company. The hatred he felt for her was the only thing keeping him alive. He'd lost the model. He'd lost the money. He'd lost the status. It was all her fault. 1 year later, the cover of Forbes magazine was not a tech billionaire or a hedge fund king. It was Elara Vance. She stood in the new lobby of the renovated Vanguard Tower, a sleek, modern, LEED-certified building. The headline was simple: "The New Vanguard, How Elara Vance Saved a $1 billion Legacy by Destroying It First." The article detailed her story, the ruthless cuts, the brilliant pivot to data centers and sustainable tech, the full repayment of the J.P. Morgan loan 4 months early. Vanguard's stock wasn't just stable, it was at an all-time high. She had not only saved Marcus's legacy, she had surpassed it. Ilara was a different woman. She was still quiet, still elegant, but she moved with an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. She was CEO and chairwoman, respected and by many feared. She was fair, she was brilliant, and she was utterly uncompromising. The divorce from Julian had been finalized months ago. His adultery claim had held. He had received nothing. The $5 million offer he'd once slid across the table was a distant, bitter joke. One evening, Ilara was leaving the Vanguard Tower, later than usual. She was discussing a new acquisition in Berlin with her CFO. As she walked through the revolving doors to her waiting car, a figure stepped out of the shadows. He was thin, haggard, and his Xenia suit, one of the last good ones he owned, was rumpled and stained. His face was blotchy, his eyes bloodshot. "Ilara," he said, his voice a hoarse croak. Ilara stopped. Her security detail, 2 new men she'd hired, moved to intercept him, but she held up a hand. "Julian," she said, her voice even, betraying no emotion. "Ilara, I'm sorry," he stammered. He looked pathetic, a ghost of the arrogant man who had dismissed her in their penthouse. "I was a fool. I was blind. That woman, Chloe, she twisted me. My father, his sickness. I wasn't thinking straight." Ilara just looked at him. She said nothing. "Please, Ilara," he begged, taking a step closer. Her security guard put a hand on his chest, stopping him. I'm ruined. I have nothing. I can't even get a job. All I'm asking for is a second chance, a job, something, anything. I'm still a Vance. I can help you. I know the business." "No, Julian," Ilara said, her voice quiet but devastatingly final. "You don't. You never knew the business. You only knew the trappings of it. The cars, the women, the lunches at Daniel. You never knew the work. The real work." "But I'm your husband. I mean, we had 12 years. 12 years, Ilara repeated, nodding slowly. "And in all that time, you never saw me. You never respected me. You never even knew me. You thought I was background, remember? You said you were tired of the background." She adjusted the cuff of her Loro Piana coat. "The thing you don't understand, Julian, is that I'm not angry at you. Not anymore. I'm not anything. You just don't matter." She stepped past him. "Wait," he cried, his voice breaking. "Please, don't do this. I'm begging you. What am I supposed to do?" Ilara paused at the door of her Rolls-Royce Cullinan. She looked back at him, a man drowning in the rainy, unforgiving reflection of the 6th Avenue pavement. "I don't know, Julian," she said, "but you'll figure it out. After all, you still have your watch collection." She got in the car. The door shut with a solid, expensive thud. As the car pulled away, Julian Vance was left alone on the sidewalk, screaming her name in the rain, a man who had everything and was left with exactly what he deserved. Nothing. 6 months passed. The brutal New York winter had thawed into a bright, hopeful spring. The city, like Vanguard Holdings, was in a period of renewal. Ilara Vance had not just stabilized the company, she had made it a titan of innovation. The stock was a darling of the S&P 500, and her pivot to sustainable technology and data infrastructure was being taught as a case study at Harvard Business School. She was no longer the Iron Widow. She was simply EV. Today, however, was not about profit margins or quarterly earnings. Ilara stood on the polished concrete floor of a vast, light-filled atrium in the Bronx. This was the Marcus Vance Innovation Center, a state-of-the-art campus she had personally funded, designed to provide high-level tech and business education to students from low-income communities. This was her answer to Julian's vanity projects. Where he had built monuments to himself, she was building a foundation for others, using Marcus's name not as a brand, but as a promise. Margaret, now retired from Vanguard and serving as the full-time director of the Vance Foundation, walked over with a tablet. "Alara, the press is set up by the main stage. The mayor is in the green room, and the first cohort of students is arriving. We're ready when you are." Alara smiled, a genuine, warm expression that her board of directors rarely saw. "Thank you, Margaret. How are the students? Are they excited?" "They're terrified and thrilled," Margaret said, her eyes twinkling. "That young woman, Maria Sanchez, the one who wants to code for orbital mechanics? She's already cornered the head of our engineering division. I think she might have a job before the end of the ceremony." "Good," Alara said. "That's why we're here." She looked up at the wall, where a simple, elegant inscription was carved into the white marble. "The true value of a legacy is not in what you keep, but in what you build for others. Marcus Vance." She felt a sense of peace. The grief for Marcus had finally softened from a sharp pain to a dull, warm ache. She had honored her promise. She had protected his legacy, and now she was making it grow. She was about to walk toward the stage when a commotion near the entrance caught her eye. It was not the loud, angry sound of a protest, but a low, desperate pleading. She saw two of her new security guards, a polite but firm barrier, trying to move a man back toward the street. I just need to speak with her," a voice rasped. She'll see me. I'm Julian." Alara's blood ran cold. She motioned to her personal security head, Mr. Stevens. "It's all right. Let him through." Margaret gasped. "Alara, no, you shouldn't." "It's fine, Margaret. Let him come. I want this to be finished." The guard stepped aside, and the man stumbled into the bright, clean atrium. Alara almost didn't recognize him. This wasn't the haggard man from the rainy street 6 months ago, still wearing the last vestiges of his former life. This man was gone. He was skeletal. His skin had the grayish, papery quality of long-term malnutrition and cheap alcohol. He wore filthy jeans and a stained New York Jet sweatshirt, his feet in broken-down sneakers. His hair was long, matted and streaked with grey. But the most terrifying change was in his eyes. The arrogant, cold fire she had known for 12 years was gone. In its place was a hollow, desperate, and slightly unhinged vacancy. He was a ghost, haunting a building he didn't know. He shuffled toward her, blinking in the bright light, his gaze fixed on her. "Alara," he whispered. He smelled of unwashed clothes and vodka. You look good." "Julian," she said. Her voice was not cold, not angry. It was flat, the voice one uses for a stranger. "You shouldn't be here." I saw it, on the news. In a shop window," he stammered, gesturing vaguely at the magnificent building. This is my father's. His name. You can't just..." "I can't what, Julian? Honor him? Do something good with the money you tried to set on fire?" "It's my money," he hissed, a spark of the old, petulant Julian flashing in his dead eyes. "It's my name. You're spending my inheritance." "You have no inheritance, Julian," Alara said patiently, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "You gave it up. You threw it away. The same way you threw me away." "No!" he cried, and his voice cracked, drawing the attention of the arriving guests, who began to whisper. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I was sick. Chloe, she manipulated me. But I'm better now. I can help." He lurched forward, grabbing her arm. "Elara, please, I'm begging you. I have nothing. I sleep in a shelter. I eat at the Bowery Mission. My name is worthless. No one will hire me. I'm Robert. Just Robert, a day laborer. Please, I'll do anything. I'll be your assistant. I'll sweep the floors. Just don't let me die in the street. Please." He was crying now, his body shaking with sobs and withdrawals. He was a pathetic, broken creature, kneeling on the polished floor of the legacy he'd abandoned. The press, sensing blood, began to move closer, cameras discreetly filming. Elara looked at the man at her feet, the man she had once loved, the man who had callously told her she was background. She felt nothing. No anger, no hate, not even satisfaction, just a vast, empty pity. He wasn't a monster. He was just empty, a hollow shell. She gently removed his hand from her arm. "Mr. Stevens," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the now silent atrium. Her head of security was at her side instantly. "Ma'am." "Mr. Vance is clearly unwell," Elara said, her gaze steady, projecting calm and control. "Please take him to the catering tent and see that he gets a hot meal and some coffee. Then give this to a driver." She scribbled on a small card from her pocket. It was the address of a high-end, long-term private care facility upstate. "Have the driver take him there. Tell the intake director to bill my foundation. He's to be admitted for exhaustion." Julian looked up, his face a mask of confusion. A hospital? You're helping me?" A desperate, ugly hope lit his face. You do still love me." Elara looked down at him, her expression finally, unchangeably, final. "No, Julian, I don't. But my father-in-law was a good man. He wouldn't have let a dog starve, and I won't either. You are a loose end. And I am, if nothing else, thorough." She turned to Stevens. "And Mr. Stevens, he is not to leave the facility. He is not to have access to a phone or the press. He is a private charity case. Understand?" "Perfectly, Mrs. Vance," Stevens said. He and another guard gently, but with undeniable strength, lifted Julian to his feet. "But, Elara, wait, we can fix this," Julian babbled as they led him away, his feet dragging. I'm sorry." His voice faded as they moved him through a side door. The guests and the press were silent, stunned. Elara stood for a moment, the picture of composure. She smoothed the sleeve of her Armani jacket. She turned to the crowd, her voice ringing with clear, calm authority. "My apologies for that interruption. My former husband is a very sick man, and we are seeing that he gets the care he needs. But he is a relic of the past. Today is about the future." She turned and walked to the podium, her back straight. She looked out at the faces of the students, the press, the city officials. She took a deep breath, and as the applause started, hesitant at first, then thundering, she smiled. She was free. What an incredible story of betrayal, justice, and the quiet, stunning power of being underestimated. Julian Vance made the mistake of his life. He thought the woman standing beside him was an accessory, when in fact, she was the entire foundation. He traded loyalty for glamour, substance for flash, and paid the ultimate price. Elara didn't just inherit a fortune, she earned it by proving she was the only one worthy of Marcus's legacy. What did you think of Julian's downfall? Was it complete and total justice, or was Elara's final dismissal too cold? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you so much for spending your time with our story today. If you enjoyed this journey of drama and revenge, please show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Share this video with a friend who loves a good tale of justice. We'll see you in the next one.